Are you ready? He's recording now.
Okay. Good morning. I'd like to call the April 17th Community Service Committee meeting to order. Could I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Seroy,
Present.
Ms. Weber, Mr. Stauffenberg, Mr. Vickery, Mr. Tholen, Ms. Polk, Mr. Snipes, Mr. Hildebrand, Ms. Evans, Mr. Payton, Ms. Peters, Ms. Dunbar, Ms. Parker, Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Wheeler, Mr. Lear. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment today? Any public comment? Seeing none, could I get a motion to approve the minutes from January 16th? Mr. Vickery and Mr. Payton. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion, all opposed? Motion carries. I'd like to introduce the assessor, Mr. Eric Blair. Good morning, Eric. Could I get a motion to approve Mr. Blair's monthly report, March 8 of 2018? Mr. Snipes and Mr. Fairfield. Second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. That's just the monthly report. We will do the board a review reappointment in a moment. Okay. Go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I got a couple of agenda items to go over with you this morning before I get into my normal just explanation of what we've been doing in the office and what we expect to do coming up. So first I'll start with the Pembroke Township Assessor update. The Pembroke Township trustees did enter into a contract with Marcia Tedford, who is the Momence Township Assessor, to be the Pembroke Township Assessor at least for the balance of this year. I believe it ends on November 30th of 18. So for the foreseeable future, that's at least been resolved for now, because they did have a vacancy. I don't know if I should stop. Is there any questions about that?
Mr. Payton.
Could you give me that name again? Thank you.
Sure, it's Marcia Tedford. She is the Momence Township Assessor, and the Pembroke Township trustees entered into the contract with her because of the vacancy.
Yeah.
Mr. Vickery.
Yeah, Marcia's filled in before for Janier Township, and she is the Momence Township Assessor. She's filled in several times before. Thank you.
That is correct, yeah. When they had a vacancy engineer, she filled in until they were able to
Thank you, sir.
get somebody to do it more full-time. The other issue that I wanted to bring to the attention
Hold
of
up,
this...
Eric. Mr. Wheeler.
Sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to use this opportunity, since you're first, and the board seems to be under continual assault from one particular publication that says that the assessments are not being done by the county correctly in the Pembroke Hopkins Park area, and that they are continually, this publication is saying it's our fault for all of these misassessments, and there's no place that the homeowners can go to get their grievances heard. I wanted to take the opportunity to first of all dispel that, because it is the township elects an assessor. Now we have somebody to fill in for that assessor.
That's correct.
And that was engineered, hopefully, and coordinated through you. And I know I appreciate your efforts there to get everybody hooked up. But also, what is the appeals process? So people that are watching this video
Sure.
will understand how, if they have a problem with their assessment, what is the process for them to have that heard?
Sure. And as I've reported to this committee for the last few years, I'll go over that briefly again. 2015, 16, and 17, we published the assessments in the newspaper basically on the same day each year. It's pretty close. It was about September 15th each year. That's a county-wide publication. It's a county-wide invitation for anybody that has an issue with their assessment. They have a 30-day window to file an appeal against their value if they disagree with it. And at that point, once they file that appeal, the township would be notified of that appeal so that they have a chance to respond. But there will be a Board of Review hearing scheduled for that particular parcel. If the person wants to show up and have their case heard in person in front of our 3-person Board of Review, that's an independent body apart from any of the assessing authority at the township level or at the county level. All of the assessing in this county really comes from the townships, though. It's pretty important to recognize the idea that the townships play a very big role in the valuation of property. But that is the avenue that a person should take, whether it's in Pembroke Township or any other township in the county, is that 30-day window, which is triggered by my publication, which I try to make middle of September each year. It's not, doesn't have to be, but I try to make it as consistent as possible so that the public knows what to expect from one year to the next. Does that fully address
I think it
your
does.
question and
Yeah.
concern? Okay.
I got
Very good.
one item to add. There's no cost for this appeal.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There's no cost to appeal, so you can just ask.
What time of the day do these hearings happen?
Typically, we start those at about 8:45 in the morning, and depending on the level of the schedule for the for the day, it might be that the Board of Review meets for the entire day, but usually it's the morning. It's probably from about 8:30 to 11 or something like that. The person who gets the hearing, if they ask for one, or actually if they file an appeal, they're going to get a hearing. They get a 30-day notice of when that hearing is and what time it is, and if it conflicts with their schedule, we try to do the best we can to make sure that we move their hearing to a time that is more suitable for them.
So yeah, and I appreciate that, because one of the things would be, potentially show bus doesn't operate at the time if it's in 6 p.m. or whatever. You
Sure.
can't get a ride in. So there should be no reason why transportation should be a problem, because there are avenues for that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on that particular item?
Mr. Snipes.
My question is if you received a tax bill like in 2015, but not the tax bill, the value,
The assessment change
the
notice?
assessment, right? If there is no change, are you sent out something anyway?
No, well, if it's not your general assessment year, if it's not your township's general assessment year, and no change was made to the value other than maybe an equalization factor in my department, no. But we do publish in the newspaper. I mean, it's visible. It's very visible. Most townships are published in the Daily Journal, but we do still use some smaller publications for other townships who feel like they're better served in those smaller newspapers. But even if you don't receive a notice and your value is not published in the newspaper, that doesn't mean that you don't have the opportunity to appeal the value if you don't think it's correct. All properties can be appealed, whether they were published or not.
Right. What I was thinking of is when that time comes and they have not because they fall within that window, then they will probably miss the date, because there's really like no notification if they don't get the Daily Journal or that smaller newspaper that's in their community. There's no letter or anything out or anything that goes to the churches in the community that says that is this time is up so you can appeal, if that's the case. And I'm wondering, is there something that we can do as far as maybe you might have like an email thing that goes out, or if they don't do emails? So.
Yeah, I mean, all I can speak to is statutorily, excuse me, I'm required to publish in the newspaper. That's for general notice, and anybody that gets a change to their value in a non-quadrennial year, general assessment year, would get that letter in the mail. Certainly also concerned citizens that call, we try to make sure that we remind them, start calling us in the middle of August or so, see if we know when we're going to publish. We probably won't at that time because we have to line it up with the newspaper first. And if they call us each week or two, we'll certainly let them know when we're going to publish, and they would be aware that way. So there's a myriad of different ways that they can become aware. I don't know if I have any better ways of getting out to the public more than pushing it out in the newspaper and mailing out the letters that are statutorily required.
Thank you. Mr. Payton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could set up a meeting in Pembroke, would you be willing to come to explain that process? Because we do get quite a few complaints.
We could certainly talk about maybe a town hall situation, if it's specific to one jurisdiction, or if it's more of a county-wide
I could work
effort.
through the township,
Sure, we can talk about maybe setting something like that up.
Thank you.
Anything else about tax assessments for Mr. Blair, and can move on the agenda?
Yeah, anything else about the assessment issue there? Otherwise, I was going to move to the Board of Review reappointment. Every 2 years, we have, each year we have at least one seat on the Board of Review that becomes up for reappointment. And we have one right now, which was advertised, I believe, or put on the website maybe a month ago or so, Chairman Wheeler. So the gentleman who occupies that spot is our Board of Review Chairman, Steve Cody, and I was just trying to bring to the committee this morning the idea that maybe we could forward a recommendation, I would believe probably to the Executive Committee for this month, for a reappointment for Steve Cody to remain on the Board of Review. He has expressed an interest in staying on the board. I believe in fact, I know that he's turned in an application to be reappointed, and I was hoping to get a recommendation from this committee to be forwarded to Executive Committee on behalf of Mr. Cody.
I will entertain any motion. Mr. Vickery and Mr. Snipes, second. All in favor? All opposed? On to Executive Committee.
Okay.
What's the terms on the Board of Review?
It's a 2-year appointment.
2-year appointment?
2-year
Okay.
appointment, yeah. And 2 of the members were reappointed last year, so they're good through until this time next year. And we have one that's up right now, and he needs to be reappointed by May, or he would not be. We would be one person short. So.
Okay.
Beyond that, I would just get into my normal presentation for you and just kind of go over what we've been doing and what we plan to do coming up here. And then we haven't met since January, so some of this stuff's going to be a little bit older, but I'm gonna go through it anyway. Since last we met, I did roll to the new year in the assessment system. We did that in the middle of January, I think shortly right after we met in January. I did receive the certification of the 2017 final abstract from the Department of Revenue. We did not receive any equalization factor against that abstract that would affect any values. I didn't expect anything, and that's exactly what happened. All of the numbers stayed the way they were, the way that I turned it over to the clerk at the end of December in 17. Along with that, when we rolled to the new year, we did update the farmland calculations before we printed the assessment books and got those out to the townships. So we did distribute those in January to the townships. They do have their books, and they're working on their assessments now for the 2018 year. We mailed out the exempt status renewal forms, as we do on an annual basis, for those that have to file a certificate of exempt status renewal stating that no change in use has happened with the property. And also, we've done a good job of trying to keep up with the exemption entry, the 2017 exemption entry, so that when the clerk does cut tax rates, it's reflective of all the exemptions that we have for the 2017 year. So, and something I didn't put in here, we're also going to try to do our best to have all the names and addresses updated right along with when the treasurer cuts us off and starts to print tax bills in the next couple of weeks or whenever it is that he pulls the trigger and goes ahead and prints tax bills. So we're trying to make sure that the names and addresses are as current as possible at the moment that he creates that file. The only other thing that I would add that I've done, and it wasn't on my sheet either, is I did provide the townships with an estimate of percentage change that I need to see in 2018 for their jurisdiction in order to avoid equalization. So if, they're typically wanting to know what that number is so they get an idea of how much change they need to make for the year in order to avoid equalization. And I would just like to let you know that at least from a countywide standpoint, my projection, which hasn't run through the Department of Revenue process yet, but my projection is 2.46% positive gain in assessment value for the county. And that's broken out differently for each township, but from a county perspective, it's a 2.46 positive adjustment that we're going to need to see in 2018. So moving on to some things that are still, still pending. We still need to, and this goes to what I was just saying, we need to reconcile with the Department of Revenue on our sales ratio study. I was at a conference last week and the Department of Revenue gave a presentation, and it seems like they haven't provided that detailed list to any county yet. So the fact that we don't have it doesn't mean we're behind anybody else. It's just the Department of Revenue is taking a little bit of time to get that done this year. And I've already talked about the maintaining of ownership of record for the tax bill mailing. Wanted to give a little bit of an update on solar farm, and then I would entertain any questions you might have as well. So for the last year and a half, Delbert Skimmerhorn and I have been working pretty hard on the solar farm issue. We did get my association did get a House bill introduced. It's House Bill 5284. Once we did that, the industry did issue a competing bill in the Senate. So it's kind of, we're in negotiations trying to figure out how we can come to terms on a few things. We're really down to just two issues, and that is industry wants something called a freehold leasehold estate, basically being able to be taxed on the improvements only. And if that were to happen, then the treasurer would have a very hard time selling those taxes. And it's frankly unprecedented in the property tax code. We certainly can't have that happen. I can't see how the legislature would be agreeable to that. We have reached out to many taxing body associations, and I think they're all in agreement with us on our side as far as the language that we've used. School board associations, county board associations, and so forth. Department of Revenue as well, very, very much in agreement with what we're doing versus what the industry is doing. The other issue that we have is value, of course, in the formulated assessment that we're trying to create. We are pretty far apart on that, but what I'm told is if that's the last thing left, the two sponsors would probably get together and come up with whatever that number would be. And it was reported to me last week by our legislative person in my organization that he believes that something will be done and be on the governor's desk in August to sign for a solar assessment statute. So wanted to bring that forward to the committee and let you know about that. At this point, I'll entertain any questions that you might have on any number of topics that I've covered here.
Mr. Snipes.
with the solar farms, I guess if they're whether they're in if they're agriculture or near an urban rural area, what is there any tax-based change on the property with them being up on this, since they're not considered buildings or anything?
Well, one of the things that's going to happen is the land that's occupied, the land that's occupied by the solar project, if it's on farmland, it used to be probably production agriculture value. If it's going to be occupied by a solar farm, then the land value will no longer be assessed under the farm code, so that would change. Then also there would be an improvement value for those components that are considered real estate, and we would assess it for that. Now, that's one of the reasons why I think a legislated statute is in order, is to try to avoid the confrontation over what's real and what's personal. That was the point of the wind statute when they put that formula together, and that's basically the model that we've used, is try to come up with a formula so that we can avoid that whole argument altogether and just put it on based on the formulated value.
Okay.
Mr. Vickery.
Yes, Eric, when they establish a value, when they develop, is that part of the formula? We'll say that they establish a value on a piece of property that they're going to develop with the solar farm, and they'll say it's $3 million or $2 million, whatever that number is, for construction costs or whatever. Is that going to be part of the formula, or are they going to dictate a formula from state?
Well, the idea is that the Department of Revenue, it would be the legislature that would adopt into law, into the property tax code, a formula which would give you a per megawatt value. But that per megawatt value, from my perspective, the number that we brought forward in House Bill 5284 was developed based on what we believe it costs to construct a full megawatt of solar, and then try to come down to what part of that is likely real estate. So that formula, I'm hoping, is grounded in the idea of what it really costs to construct a megawatt of solar, but we'll wait and see what the legislature does with that component.
Would that be subject to improvements over the years?
Oh, sure. It's just like the wind statute, where it uses a trending factor, and the trending factor is developed in wind, comparing the, I believe it's the 2007 or the 2008 CPI versus today's CPI, and you get a kind of a multiplier out of that. Right now it's 1.22. So the wind statute, for example, just very quickly, the wind statute says $360,000 per megawatt times the trending factor, and taking off depreciation at 4% a year. So when you take that 360 times the current trending factor for 2018 at 1.22, the current day's value of the wind megawatt is $439,200 a megawatt because of the trending factor. And then you would, from there, you would depreciate back for the age of the project.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along this lines, I had this come up this morning, and I could have ventured a close guess to the answer, but since you're here, how much of this new construction, if you will, they were asking about wind farms, and how much will fall to, as far as revenue goes, as far as the taxation side of it, and how, with tax caps included with it, is there only a certain percentage of new valuation that we can retain based on tax caps?
Well, I think this is probably a question that's more appropriate for the clerk to answer, because I don't deal with extension and tax caps and things like that. Mm-hmm. I can quickly say that there's a certain percentage, there's a maximum percentage, I believe, that you can have in terms of an increase to your extension. I think it may be 5, but part of that is how much came from the CPI first, and whatever's left over say you get 2 from the CPI, you might have 3% more you can gain from new construction.
Right.
So there is a ceiling, if you will. It just depends on what the CPI is first. If the CPI is 1, then you can probably gain 4 from new construction. If the CPI is 4, then you can only gain 1 from new construction. Does that make sense?
That's kind of where my head was, but I want to make sure because it may come up with all of the new construction. I don't think it'll come up this year, and I think you have to wait a year before it hits, but it may come up in 2 years when we see some very large build-outs in
Sure.
other industrial facilities that you may have seen in the newspaper. So
Potentially.
yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And Dan, I'm sorry if there's something that you'd like to add when you come up that might clean up what I just said. Please do. He's waving his hand. Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay.
But,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Anything else?
Mr. Snipes.
Just one comment. It's not often that you get a chance to hear accolades, but then it's not often that you get a person that's passionate in his profession and his professionalism. And I just want to send kudos your way because no matter when we have asked you a question or if we have come to you personally, your level of professionalism and just the overall knowledge of the job is, to me, exceptional. So I just wanted to say thank you from my end.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me.
That committee agrees, I think, with Mr. Snipes' comments. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Anything else, folks? Have a nice day.
Next on the agenda is Recorder, Ms. Lori Gadbois. I need a motion to combine and approve her monthly report for January, February, and March. Mr. Payton is first and Mrs. Evans is second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Good morning, Lori.
Good morning. Good to see you again. Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it?
It's like a quarterly meeting, I think.
It is. That's okay. Just take a few extra minutes and I think we'll get through everything. Any questions, first of all, on the reports?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Vickery and Mr. Lear. Mr. Vickery's first and then Mr. Lear.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Lori.
Good morning.
Does this reflect our new fees?
Does. I have a little bit of a breakdown for you, so.
Thank you.
Okay,
I'll let you.
all right. So, January was.
Could you hold on one moment?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Lear, do you have anything?
Same question.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No, not a problem. So January, January 1 was when we instituted the new fees. It was quite a learning curve, even though we did every possible attempt to communicate, get the word out from September to January that there was going to be a new fee. So we had a process where in the month of January, we recorded 1,069 documents. Of that, 807 documents were the new fee. So that reflected an increase of revenue of $8,070.
On just 200 and
No,
some.
807.
Oh, 807 were
That
new
was
fees. Okay, so
the
only
different- the
only
$10.
200 were. Okay, gotcha. All right.
So it was a $10 increase. Okay, make sense?
Yep.
And then 262 were applicable to the old fee, along with, from the tax sale and auction that takes place in August and September or November, whenever that is. Those checks were already cut, so they reflect an old fee. So as those continue to come in, those will still get recorded under the old fee. So we're going to have a period of time where it's going to not be a solid change. Make sense?
Yep.
So, so that was the month of January. Yeah. Month of February, we recorded 815 documents. Okay. Of that, 804 were new fee. So that's good. We're getting better, which resulted in $8,040 of increased revenue from the fee. Now, I apologize for the month of March. I did not do that breakdown for you. However, I can tell you in the month of March, we recorded 1,196 documents. Compared to March of 2017, we actually had 15 documents more than the year prior. Whereas in January and February, we were actually lower in document volume.
Trending those 2 months at
Yes.
the beginning of the year?
Yes. So it's getting better. We still have customers say they didn't hear from us, didn't know about it. It's unfortunate, but we just continue to let them know. We'll hang on to it, send us a check, and we'll get your document recorded for you when we receive the correct fees. As you know, this legislation for predictable fees goes into effect statewide January 1st of 2019. That means every recorder's office in the state of Illinois has to have an established predictable fee, which I think will help overall once, you know, these industries we deal with. And it's not just local industries. We're dealing with New York and Connecticut and Florida and California and Vegas and different places. So we have it published on our association website. We have pointed to our own website. So we're doing the best we can to communicate that information. We're a predictable fee state. That means no more page counts, flat fee. So your document is this. So we're helping move the industry, especially the financial industry, forward in being able to close on homes faster and not have those last minute hiccups that might stop a closing. So it's a good thing. We'll get there. Everything takes time. Some other things, any questions on that, I guess? And I got to tell you, my staff has been fabulous in dealing with this, because it gets a little frustrating when you've told them, but we just kindly give them a call or send them a letter and let them know that since September of 2017, we've been announcing this. So some other things my office has been working on along with this is our backlog film project. As you know, we continue to microfilm and bring into our computer system old images, because people in the world need that information. Searchers that are doing title searches on your property are doing 20-year, 30-year, 50-year, sometimes depending, 100-year searches. It is my goal to have 50 years into the computer system. So currently we have contiguous 1987 to current. Now non-contiguous because of some factors that happened in my office called vinegar syndrome. And if you've ever opened one of the drawers of microfilm, you'll be introduced to vinegar syndrome. It's very bold. We were having film getting destroyed. So we had to hurry up and do 1967 and 68 right away, because that film had to be kind of quarantined from the rest of the film. Otherwise, it was just going to continue to infect. So we do have 1967 and 68 done. So to kind of bring that up, right now we're working on 69 and 70. And we're looking at about 8,602 images for 1970 and 8,977 for 1969. So that's kind of the goal of the office. On average, we are getting about a year done in 9 months with just 3 staff members and my chief deputy and myself. We all pitch in, we all help, we all take turns. We have some really great technology in my office that allows us to do this in-house and not take it out. My first year as recorder, I did send some film out. I paid $10,000 and the quality that was returned was not worth what we paid. So we learned by our mistakes, and I think what we're doing now is absolutely achievable. It's great quality, and the outside world that uses our systems loves it. So very proud of my staff for the work that they're doing. They're very committed along with me to get this goal achieved, to have 50 years in. And so we're getting there. We're getting there. So, let's see. What else do you need to know? Want to know about what's going on? Property fraud alert is continuously getting registered. We're going to be doing a push through Law Week. I was invited to attend Dr. Condon's wrap-up event. It's kind of like a little open house, and so I'm going to be bringing the property fraud kiosk with me and talking to people about protecting their most valuable asset. Or at least to most of us, our most valuable asset is our home. And so trying to get more people registered. Right now we have over 2,000 people registered in Property Fraud Alert. So we're pretty excited about that. Mr. Snipes?
Just a question. If a individual gets a call from the Property Fraud Alert, and there is something placed upon, a lien or something placed upon their property, or someone put their
Something was recorded.
right on their property and it was recorded, what happens if that was not correct? Do they have to pay to get that unchanged, or do they just come?
So what the process is they're going to get a phone call or an email or whatever, and you're going to know if you did something or not. And if you're concerned, call us up. We're going to look up what information you were given, because you're going to be given date, and you're going to be given document number. And obviously everyone knows in my office, document number is how it identifies your that document. So we look it up, and then we talk to you. We create a conversation. You know, did you refinance your home? Did you decide to give your home to this person, this other person's name that's on this document? Did you sign this transaction? And if they say no, we ask them to please come into the office. We're going to give them copies of everything. Sometimes when they come in and then they actually see the document and they see the signature, they kind of realize they did do something. And we're all busy people. Sometimes we forget what we do. Sometimes we did something, we enacted it, and maybe the service we used to get that done didn't follow through getting it recorded for 3 or 4 months, so it's forgotten. Can happen. And then other times maybe something bad was happening and somebody signed over their property, your property, to them. So we ask you to come in, get copies of everything, and depending on the situation, we strongly suggest you seek the advice of an attorney. If there's some complications, then because of the fraud opportunity that I now have, I can also contact the state's attorney's office, and then we can see what we can do on behalf of that if something fraudulent is happening.
Okay.
So, yes. This is not a line of defense to stop property fraud. This is to bring it to your attention a lot faster than you normally would, because how many people really check on their property? You know?
It's just awareness.
Right. So we're just trying to get out there to help you be more aware. And, you know, we have some wonderful people who call us every week and say they signed up and they haven't gotten a phone call yet. And I'm like, well, that's a good thing. And that's okay. And then they call the next week and we're fine with that. We love that. So we have some really great established relationships with the people of the county. So, and that's okay. Yeah. A couple of other things. I too was at IACO last week, and there's some things in the House and Senate on behalf of the Recorders Association, and or not necessarily on behalf of. It looks like Department of Revenue is, I'm sure I reported last year, Department of Revenue took all the state tax liens, and they're no longer recorded in the Recorder's Office as of January 1st. So they have their own registry. So now they're wanting to put more things in their own registry. So they are wanting to do the unemployment liens. So we oppose this. That is kind of when title work is done. There's a lot of different variables that are looked at when, you know, they're checking on you and, you know, what's against you and or your property that might need to get cleaned up before you can sell your home and vice versa. So we're seeing that Department of Revenue is really trying to move and pretty much try and take everything that has historically been in the recorder's office. An effort by Cook County is regarding mechanics liens. There's some confusion about responsibility and notability of mechanics liens. Somebody, you know, I file a mechanics lien against you. How long is it good for? If you don't pay me and I don't release it, what happens? So there's this kind of gray area going on right now. So that's a continuous work in progress as to how this is really going to be established in the statutes. And then lastly, Department of Revenue, the assessors and the recorders have been working together on MyDeck, which is this new P-tax system that the Department of Revenue believes everyone should go to and nobody should use paper anymore. So I know the assessor's office had meetings with them, and in December were mandated to switch over. Am I correct? Those that were capable, because I think there's still some assessor's offices in the state that are not capable. Correct, Eric? Yeah. So it looks like Department of Revenue is wanting to institute, making a change to a universal PIN number system, which we oppose. I believe the assessors opposed. So I don't know where that's at, but that they would be looking at like making us change all this hard work that these offices have done for years and years and years. And we're talking 55,000 parcels and having to renumber them. And believe it or not, some people know their PIN numbers and, you know, really live by them. We're against that right now. So legislatively, that's where we're at on some stuff happening currently in the Springfield. And then lastly is my request for an ordinance. I believe all of you have a copy of it. And it's regarding having the PIN number and common address when available. Not everybody has an address, believe it or not. Once an address is established, be put on all real estate related documents.
Right now, how do you have to look up the common address? Do you?
We don't. If it's not on there, we don't put it.
Okay.
We in the office, when we receive the document statutorily, we're looking for grantor, grantee, legal description, and that's how we find things in our offices, by the legal description of your property, appropriate prepared by return to signatures and notary. So many people come into my office and say, I live at 234 South Main. Can you tell me when the last deed was? Okay, do you have your PIN number? Do you have your legal description? When the minute we say legal description, they really don't know what we're talking about. We hope to God that they also brought their tax bill in with, because in the tax bill, there is a short legal that kind of helps us out a little bit more, but otherwise it'll take a little bit longer process to find it, because then we got to go through some different systems. We go through, you know, Eric's system and different things like that to find the address tied to the correct property, making sure it's the correct property. So the PIN number, your parcel identification number, is a huge asset on these documents. And common address, only because people want to see their address on their deeds. So going forward, I think this is going to accommodate that end user person, and also it's going to provide a speedier service in our office. And those, as we index, because we can only index what we see, those people out in the world that's all they put in, will be able to retrieve their information.
Mr. Wheeler?
I guess a motion to approve and then a question.
Okay. There's a first, and Mr. Tholen with the second. Questions?
Yes, the effect on your office and other offices on new forms, computer system upgrades to accommodate this, I'm unaware of the interaction, so I'm trying to get an
Okay.
idea what this might cost.
So, computer system integration with other offices right now, truly, Eric has my system in his office because they retrieve all the deeds every Monday based on all the P-Techs we brought down on Monday morning. That's not gonna be a problem. Currently, my system is set up to have common addresses and PIN numbers, actually a wealth more of information. But we're only limited to what we see. We can't make up what we don't know. But I'm glad you brought that up because moving forward, so this whole new Windows 10 thing is, and I'm going to bring it up next month because I didn't want to bore you guys with too much, but that is going to introduce other things that technology-wise, we're going to have to go to a new level because of Windows 10. So the system I have today is 10 years old. And, 10-year-old technology, and we've been updating it, and the vendor has been awesome. But because of this whole new Windows 10 thing with the securities and stuff like that, the current system I'm running doesn't have that next level. Make sense? So, working on it. I know I got about 2 years because I've been working with Kevin and Jason and how my office is going to roll over into that. So I'm kind of planning that along with what this next generation upgrade would be. So, and trying to get a good, strong punch list of costs. So maybe I could spread it out over 2 budget years. So.
Yeah, thank you. That's kind of the unknown cost. The idea is great, but we're trying to figure out, what impact it might have.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But service-wise to the end user will always be, they won't really see much of a difference.
I guess maybe we'll wait till next month, but just a question, is this DevNet related? You're not in?
No, I'm not
You're
DevNet.
Separate. And have we looked at to see if DevNet has something that you?
We
is that what you-
did, and they don't have what,
What you need?
right,
Okay.
yeah. We entertained DevNet 10 years ago, and their recording end of it is just not fulfilling
Okay.
to accomplish
We-
the things we've been accomplishing over the last 10 years.
When we talk about computer questions,
Yeah, Kevin.
I come
Shows
flying
up
up
in the
when I
back.
hear
Yeah.
that. Her office isn't part of what I'm doing for everybody else. While they're on the same physical hardwire, they're a separate network than us. So what I'm doing to make sure everybody's on Windows 10, excuse me, I ran upstairs, doesn't really apply to her. If you guys work out where you can't afford to do something, she technically can stay on 7 for a while. I don't recommend it because you're going against what Microsoft says. But what I've told you in other committee, I haven't applied to her because she's physically separate. Her logins, everything's different than us. I don't know if that helps you going forward.
Pretty much I pay for all the stuff. So I've already bought 2 because I had a computer that was an XP. That was and you're always welcome to come into my office and see how things get done. So when I say the scanning room, you know what I'm talking about. But the scanning computer that we actually take the document, scan it in so it's in the system, that's a Windows 10 computer now. So we're doing a slower integration. I have, 12 computers, I
Yes,
think?
and Lori has, she's making an attempt to go to that, as she's saying, is she has some limitations that won't allow her to do it just freely like we can on the other ones. Because she's semi-isolated from us, it's not really an issue for me. It's more of when can she do what she
Right.
needs to do. Some of the election stuff that has actually separated us sort of has the same issue, but in that case, that's maybe 1 or 2. They're isolated from us, so they don't have the same thing. Where we generally, hundreds of people touch each other, that's where I want to make sure we're at the minimum or exceed the minimum security levels. She's isolated, so she really can't harm the rest of us. Doesn't mean she can't have an issue, but
Right.
then that's her responsibility.
Yeah, you guys are good at watching out for my stuff though too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, you are. You are.
Thanks, Kevin, for the sprint up the
Thank
stairs.
you. So,
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for this resolution. Do we have to have a roll call vote? Because technically we might spend some money, or this is just bringing
no,
it?
you're not spending money.
No?
Nope.
Okay, then all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone in the committee? And again, please always feel free to come on down. If you want to take a look at your property or your neighbor's property, whatever, we'd love to show you what we do and how it gets done, and how painless it really can be. All right? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gadbois. Next on the agenda, the county clerk, Dan Hendrickson. I need a motion to combine and approve the monthly reports for January, February, and March. Ms. Parker and Mr. Stauffenberg with a second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Good morning.
Preemptively approve April through December this year, we could save a ton of time. Good morning, everybody. Long time no talk to.
Morning.
Hope you all doing well. Just basically wanted to touch base with you on a few things. Talk about the primary election. You know, it was 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, but I wanted to commend my staff on the phenomenal job that they did, that they always do with preparing for the election. For those of you that haven't met Lori Mullet's my chief deputy, also largely responsible for taking care of our election judges. We did have, I think the election went relatively smoothly. Compared to 4 years ago, turnout percentage was up about 1% from 2014. I don't know that there's any particular rhyme or reason why it was up, but we did have a couple minor challenges with the election. We do have equipment that we had to swap out on election day. We did have an optical scan machine that stopped counting ballots about 5 o'clock that evening, election night. So we swapped that machine out, ran the ballots through after the polls closed, and everything balanced. So we were good with that. We did have a touchscreen machine that we had to swap out because of calibration issues. That equipment is 12 years old, and some of that, so it is a concern. But we will do our best to make do with what we have until something better comes along. Election judges, and I'm going to turn this over to Lori for a little bit. We had a difficult time finding election judges. Lori, do you want to give a quick recap on what we had? And
we had, sorry.
First time.
We were short judges. We had actually 16 precincts that operated on election day with 3 judges alone. That's a lot. And I know it wasn't a busy election, but they still have to go through the same process as if it was a busy election. So they still have to do all the same paperwork and everything. So that was a big challenge. I did get some help from some precinct committeemen, some county board members helped me. The issue with some of that was, and we did go on the radio, we announced it. Social media, yeah, we did all that. Had a good response from some of that. I had about 15 judges contact me. Hooked them up with training. Because of our time crunch, we did do a lot of online training this time. Because of the time crunch, we didn't have time for classes all the time. We did handle 2 in-person certification classes. We did do that. The rest were required to do online. I had 3 people complete it. So out of the 15 inquiries we got, only 3 completed it. So I was only able to really utilize 3 of those. The other ones, you can still utilize them, but they just don't get the same pay. And when they find that out, they're not going to work.
And that pay is?
The pay is $145 for the day if you're certified. So if you go through the training, otherwise it's dropped down to $75. So that was the biggest challenge with the judges. So we had some with 4 judges that ran pretty smooth, and then the bigger precincts we tried to keep with the 5 judges. So that was the challenge with the judges this time.
Did anybody have any experiences on election day that they like to share, or any questions about the process?
Oh, Mrs.
Ah,
Weber.
one of our judges.
I was,
Mrs. Weber.
I just to commend that we didn't have any major problems in Pilot One, but when we did, the person was right there, you know, and helped us out, and we could not find that sheet for anything, and there it was, right where she said it was, you know. So just commending, you know, answer our questions. Every call got answered, you know. And glory, we're already paid.
Yeah.
Thank you. Though.
Thank you for working, by the way.
Mr. Snipes?
Yeah, I generally check in from time to time on the election judges in 13, and I think I'm one of many probably that provides lunch or something, because I just like to, you know, I see them flow with the business, so, you know, outside of what they brought in, I may have pizza and stuff delivered just to show them some appreciation for being there or whatever, but I think for those that are there, you know, with the different machines and things, they were pretty knowledgeable and kept the flow going. So, you know, I commend them on the efforts. Those that have that day of public service, you know, they're on the thing. They have to go through the trainings, etc. But they are willing to come out and for a whole day, and you know, that 145 is, you know, it's more of a thank you for showing up more so than a actual pay for what they have to go through.
And you're exactly right, Mr. Snipes. You know, if you think about it, you know, the judges get to the polling place at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they're there on average till about 8 o'clock that night, and that's a 15-hour day for $145. But that doesn't include the amount of time that they spend in training. You know, I would probably estimate that, you know, they spend at least 5 hours of time, you know, going through the materials. Certainly if they're going through the online session and attending our refresher classes, there's another 3 to 5 hours involved in that. So, you know, I would like to, you know, pay our judges more, but I'm fully aware of the financial constraints that we face. So, you know, I can't say enough about our judges too. I'd put our judges up against any other county.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, that's a subject that, you know, I was around. I went to a lot of polls, and I noticed that we are, and it's been really ongoing for the past, I don't know, as long as I've been paying attention. It seems like we have less and less judges. Every year we lose people and they're not being replaced, no matter how much outreach we do and how much we doing on social and online training opportunities, fewer and fewer and fewer. And we have declining, you know, we had an uptick this year in the primary, but typically we're not gaining a lot of ground on people showing up at the polls. We've got a couple aberrations there, but my thought is I think we should take a hard look on consolidation. On some of these locations, looking for opportunities there, because when you have the type of numbers that show up in some of the rural areas that could be consolidated with other, you know, locations, I think it makes sense to bring it back to this committee with a full set of recommendations based on the numbers, not just for this past election, but for the past few cycles. What could we consolidate and have enough judges there to handle a big November election or a big next time around on the municipal side or whatever happens?
I wouldn't disagree with you on that, and certainly I can have something for the committee for next month to list some opportunities that we could potentially have for consolidation. You know, consolidation does achieve a couple of things. It does provide us, you know, if we reduce the number of precincts, that gives us more equipment that we can use as spares. It reduces the number of judges that we need to have, so that there is some financial savings with that. You know, but there is the potential cost, you know, that are we inconveniencing voters? But that's something that we can provide in this report, and I can give you those numbers, and we can talk about it next month if you'd like.
Mrs. Peters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When was the last time you raised the fee for the judges?
For judges, it's been 145 for
At least 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. For that figure, I mean, the last time that we did the survey, comparing, for what our neighbors are paying, we're on the high end. That doesn't take into account, we're one of the counties that has to have same-day registration at every polling place. So that there are some additional duties placed on our judges that other counties don't have. But it is one of those things. We're paying them for the same amount of work that somebody that doesn't have to do same-day registration. So it's a consideration.
Mr. Vickery?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Dan.
Good morning.
The threshold for same-day registration on a county population,
100,000.
that was one of the problems. I think we're just over that.
We were 113,000 and change, I believe.
Yeah. So the next thing is in our Moments area, there within about 5 blocks, we have 4 voting places, and you're aware of.
Correct.
So that may be a possibility for consolidation.
Sure. Statute currently says that if you have over 800 voters in a polling location for 2 consecutive elections, you're required to split them. So that would be the criteria that I would look at for consolidations. I know that there's some areas that we can look at, and like Mr. Wheeler had alluded to, some of the rural areas, certainly Norton Township. The concern that you've got is where do you have that polling place, and we'll investigate that as well. Otto Township could be a potential. There's some other places that we could look at. Those were just 2 that came off the top of my head, but I'll have as comprehensive a report as I can provide for you next month.
Thank you.
Mrs. Weber?
Thank you. I just, the people I talked with who I encouraged to be a judge, it was the training. And I don't know how I could ever be a judge without that training. It's so important. Even with the testing is really good to have the testing. So the money isn't an issue. I don't think money is an issue. It's, they just don't want to commit to the training. But it's so much easier to do it online than to come into a location. So
right, and it would be under the most dire circumstances that we would have somebody that didn't have any training in there. I would not be comfortable, that's my name on the ballot, so I would hate to have somebody in there that's not trained and not following the law.
Well, exactly. If they're not trained, they're going to accept somebody to vote if they haven't shown the right information.
Right.
I can understand the problem. You're looking for a workforce that might not be available, and I know you've reached out through the paper and social media and all that, and I'm trying to think of a place that would have a workforce that you could easily access that you might not be accessing yet. And I know in past your predecessor has used some high school seniors.
Oh, and we
you still do that?
Absolutely
okay.
do.
Now here's another one. What about assisted living places that would have people there, that might not have the means to get to the polling place? It would be there'd be a transportation issue, but you might have people that are willing to give their time, but might not have the means to get to the job.
That would be the concern, is that the transportation to the polling place on election day, I don't know, and this would be, we'd have to brainstorm this, but we've got to have a way to get them to the polling place and to get them back home too.
Agreed. And I know in my thought, I always have been thinking about, what if you had, you got your core group that you probably always have had of your judges. Now, you've probably got some leaders in that group. Maybe they could be responsible to go grab some other people for a couple extra dollars. I'm just trying to get
Sure,
you the
sure.
manpower that you
We
need.
can explore that.
You know,
certainly.
it might be to go through your judges to get more judges might be a better avenue too. It might be a little finder's fee or something. You bring in a judge, you know.
I wouldn't be
Get to
opposed
vote
to that.
twice or
We-
something.
I didn't hear that part of it. I did not hear the part.
We did offer incentive to Olivet students this time because we were short touchscreen judges and we were trying to get more
Yes.
technology people. So we did offer for existing touchscreen judges from Olivet that have been worked in a couple of elections. We did offer them, find us another judge that goes through training and that completes the workday.
Yeah.
You'll get an extra $10.
I like that.
And we had one judge step up, and that but only one.
Right. It's a process, I'm sure. Mr. Vickery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Voting has come a long way. My first election in 1973, you were required to have a water bill. That's how you presented your voter identification. You showed up with a water bill. Well, one of my poll watchers had never seen these people, but they had a water bill. Okay, so we've come quite a ways.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, and my first task as a council member was be chairman of the election committee, which meant I had nothing to do for 2 years. However, at that point in time, I changed the rules of the game, and we involved the county, and they had to be registered voters from that point on. So we've come a long ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vickery.
Just a few other things to, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. We did have a couple of judges that had some concerns about our existing polling places. And we're going to look into the possibility of relocating a couple of those polling places. So we'll probably be bringing that back to your attention for the next community services meeting. As Ms. Gadboy had talked, we did have some legislation that has kind of advanced, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up on that. Some of the bills that were in committee have kind of withered on the vine and died, but there is a Senate bill that would authorize the increase. We had talked about that being 800 voters, but could potentially increase the size of the precincts to 1,200 voters. So that could have a potential impact for us. There's a Senate bill that authorizes election authorities to reduce the number of election judges from 5 to 3 in a precinct for any election. Currently, the legislation states that it's the county board that can authorize the reduction of number of judges to 3 for anything except a general election. So this would give the power back to the election authority, and it would qualify for any election. Automatic pre-registration, which apparently will see some action this year, would allow for the pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds that go through the DMV to get their driver's license. That would pre-register them to vote, and then once we are eligible to put them into the system, we would put them in. Not a fan, because people move, and having somebody in the system for a year, could be a year and a half before we process them as a voter, just seems to be a little bit ambitious. And there's also a Senate bill on vote centers. I've read the legislation. I would not tell you that I've head to toe, I'm comprehensively knowledgeable, but it's something that could potentially be explored. For us to use vote centers, we almost have to have schools as polling places. When you're talking about size of these, the legislation as it's written says that maximum size of 7,500 voters, which is huge. What facilities have or that large enough that could meet those in schools is the answer to that. So it would be something, depending on how far this gets, we can explore it, but we would need a lot of help with that. So That's it for the legislation. Just wanted to, on June 19th, following the community services meeting, we are going to have a voter fair down at the second floor conference room. Speaking of equipment, our vendor does have some new voting equipment that they would like to demonstrate. No strings attached on this.
Don't drive the car.
I'm just, I'm aware that there's some federal grant money that's going to be distributed to Illinois. As far as security goes, the amount that Kankakee County is going to get, I don't know yet. And when we're going to get that, the state board isn't sure. And what we can use it for, they haven't defined yet. But, a lot of people are talking about the potential for using that for election equipment. So they would like to show us the equipment. I said, I'm happy to show it. You can show it. I'd like to invite some of our election judges in to take a look at the equipment. But I've also told them, where we are money-wise. No commitment at all on this. So I'd like you all to come down and take a look at it just for information purposes. On May 3rd, we're going to KCC as part of their Passport to Civics Fair. So we'll be out there from 6:30 to 8, and we'll be answering any questions people have about our passports, voter registration, vital records. Any questions they've got that we can answer, we'll be happy to do so. We're going to be contacting all of the high schools for voter registration, as we do every year, going out to the high schools and registering those seniors. Our voter registration system, we're in the process. You all voted on the switching over to Platinum systems. We're getting the data from Votech, our existing system, and in the process of getting that transported over. We're on schedule. It's not moving as fast as I would like, but I need to learn a little bit more patience. Tax extensions, we are still on track. It's our expectation that we will roll to the treasurer sometime next week, which is a few days ahead of schedule. So, anybody have any questions?
Mr. Stauffenberg.
Dan, I don't have a question, but about a few months back, my wife and I attended an insurance seminar, and the speaker was a technological guru what he was predicting with the new generations, the millennium generation, our generation, and so forth. He pulls out his cell phone and he said, in the year 2030, this is all you will need. You will not have credit cards. You will not have money. He ordered a Uber car, a pizza, paid 3 bills, all in 5 seconds. He said, you'll vote with this? And I'm thinking, ooh, so I just wonder if you ever heard anything like that, or we got to be prepared for that. And
I've heard of conversations about cell phone voting. Historically, Illinois is glacially slow to move to new technology. 2030, that would put me right at about 67 years of age.
I'll be gone.
No.
I see people get on airplanes with their phone.
Sure. It really does become a matter of, how do I know that who's on the cell phone here is the person that's voting?
Sure.
So, they would have to be some sort of biometric talisman or indicator that, could you do your thumbprint and then, yep, that's Dan, and here's Dan's ballot. And then as far as the security of the transmission of that ballot back to the election authority.
This guy was from California, so they're a little ahead of things. And he sat at our table. He scared me to death. I wasn't hungry after he got done talking.
Sure. And then what do you do for those people that don't have cell phone technology? So anyone else? I won't take up any more time. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Next on the agenda is Animal Control, Miss Julie Boudreau. I need a motion to combine and approve January, February, and March monthly reports. Mr. Tholen, Mr. Fairfield with a second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning. Let me give you a copy of each month. March.
Thank you.
And January. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me give you. I'm like, where's mine?
This is your legislative stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's one for you and Diane.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You have 3 reports in front of you. Are there any questions on any of them? I think our numbers are holding pretty consistent with last year. You'll notice the amount of, where's my cat one? Last year, this time, we had dealt with a really big cat situation. I'm grateful to say that this year we haven't.
The weather's not cooperated yet, though.
Oh, they'll be bustling, but we had helped someone that had really let their heart get away and had a lot of cats in the home, and we were able to help them, and we were really grateful for that. But I am happy that that's certainly not the situation this year. You'll also notice on registration for March, it looks down compared to last year. As we went to some new software updates, we were working real hard to get all of 2017 stuff in. We had some hospitals trickle in late stuff that they had misplaced, just hadn't gathered yet or hadn't submitted. So it is kind of delayed getting some of the 2018 stuff in, and I think you'll see that number increase again in April. So I just wanted to let you know that I didn't see that as a downward trend. You'll see that kind of adjust itself next month. Okay, I have a few things on the agenda this morning. Get back to my page here. Legislative bills, I handed out some bills that are in the Senate and the House right now. As I understand, in order for me to really speak on behalf of Kankakee County, I have to get permission from this committee and the full board to do that. I do sit as the vice president of the IACA Association, that's the Illinois Animal Control Association. And, while that organization has opinions on what they support and oppose, they can sometimes differ from what the county wants. But here are several bills that are out there, and I would like to ask the committee for permission to be supportive of these bills. The first one, Senate Bill 2270, refers to the mandatory rabies for cats throughout Illinois. We already have that in our county, but there are many counties that do not have that. And, it's something that's been talked about quite a bit. Cats are quickly moving up the ladder, really, on probably the most popular companion animal. They're in everyone's homes. They're avid hunters. We've seen an increase in rabid bats in the last few years. And when those bats are in our homes, our cats are sure to do the job that they so aptly do. And the state is trying to get that passed so that more counties, more cats are vaccinated, which is just a public safety measure to to help reduce rabies from rearing its ugly head in our corner of the world. So certainly would like to be supportive on that. House Bill 5477 is an animal shelter transfer report. There are always been a lot of talk about the statistical data that is collected from the animals, animal controls and shelters. We all have to report back to the Department of Ag annually when we renew our license. For a quick example, if we take in 4 dogs and then we report that, in our annual report that we, 4 dogs intake, and then we move them to a shelter partner, and then they report that they took in 4 dogs. Sometimes these same 4 dogs are getting counted over and over again. So they're getting some real specific language into the data that's going to be collected, not only by animal controls, but by shelters, the transfer of animals up through the states, how many we have to start. I mean, it's really very specific. So I encourage you to go, look at the bills. But this is something that our association's really happy to see, that we will get a more accurate data collection by this bill being passed. And Senate Bill 2313, county animal safety funds. Some of the counties have long had a population control fund established in their county, as Kankakee has. So the $10 differential from the rabies tags has gone into that and allows to help with spay and neuter, allows us to helps pay for spay and neuter of our own shelter animals. And some of the other monies, public safety monies associated with dangerous dog declarations, vicious dog sanctions, some of that stuff was going down to the state, as I always understood it. And I talked to the public health department several years ago. This was not something that they really volunteered to manage. It kind of got dropped in their laps. And when I had talked to, I really don't know who it was, but they said, regardless of how much money comes to the state, the General Assembly will only allocate a certain amount for this program, and the rest gets swept. Well, this is money that is being collected in our communities, in our counties, and it needs to stay within our communities. So this bill will put that money, all of those monies, back into our community, and we can use it for population control funds. Some of it can be used for other measures as we see fit, maybe in training, things like that for our officers, or equipment that's needed. So we think this is a really positive step, and I'm sure the public health department is happy to see it go back to the counties where it belongs. The last one is Senate Bill 3218. Right now, this still kind of looks like a shell bill out there. We've been working with, I believe it's Senator Murphy up north. They had a constituent that came and talked about the concerns of, their dog getting killed by another dog. We've had a lot of that. Last year, we had multiple cases, more than I've seen in my 18 years here, of dog-on-dog aggression. I think I spoke to the committee some time ago about the horrific incident that happened in the city of Kankakee. And it's really happening quite a bit. We just had one just recently where a dog was killed. And this reckless owner language really kind of puts the responsibility where it truly belongs, and that's with the owner of the animal. You can deem a dog dangerous, you can deem a dog vicious, but historically those owners are going to go out and get another dog. They're going to be irresponsible with it. And it's their lack of responsibility and training their dog properly, maintaining it properly. So we're really hopeful that this language will get established and put the responsibility where it belongs, and that's with the owners that are acting recklessly. So we're in support of that too.
Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you. All these, look fine to me. I don't know how the committee feels. I question. Not question the Welfare Act itself, but HB 5477. How were the shelter partners, the part of the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, how did they feel about this?
I don't know that we've talked about all of these bills because they're state statutes. It wasn't necessarily county ordinance. So I don't know that as a group that we've talked about these yet. We've had, been quite busy.
Health records transferring has been an issue that.
We did.
Your microphone, please.
We've been talking about making sure that the health records transfer with the animals, especially intrastate and interstate. We wanted to make sure that the shelters are complying with that, those are transferred with the animal. But I don't think we've not talked about this yet. I mean, this is something that we'll probably talk about next week.
Sure, and you know, some of these bills will sit real quiet,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, boy, they get momentum and it's moving fast, and then I don't have the opportunity to bring it to the committee or for it to go to the board. So I'm bringing them now in hopes that the committee will have a chance to look at them, hopefully allow this to move on to the board here in a couple weeks, and see if we can be supportive of these things. But yes, Dr. Wagner, has done a lot of work and research in trying to help advise the shelters of some of the laws and the permits that they didn't realize that they need to have when they're transporting animals. I can tell you locally, we have a disclosure law through the state that any animal that we transfer from our shelter to another shelter, we have to have a disclosure saying what, when, where it went, what we gave. We often don't see that with other shelters. I can only police myself on that. I can tell you that one shelter one animal control didn't realize just how important that was and sent an animal somewhere else, and they got fined by the Department of Ag for that. And it wasn't a blatant, it was just an oversight.
Well, I guess my point is this 5477 is exactly why we formed this committee, was to take a look at these types of things and to provide input before this committee makes a decision on it. Now, I'm not going to say we will always go in line with what that committee would say. I think we would want to hear the facts, and if there is a recommendation to support or not to support, we would listen to that and the reasons why. But it makes it hard for me to make that decision when that community is not represented here today to tell us how they feel about it. So, and that's not a chastising statement. It would be, if we support this, I would like for the full board, if we do a letter of recommendation or whatever, I would like to have, whether it's an email poll that goes out to those committee members or whatever else, to see what their thoughts are or questions.
Because if this passes, it's going to have costs on the actual shelter owner.
Right.
Yeah,
And it
I
may
agree.
be the right thing to do, and shelters may not want to do it, and we still support this.
Right.
I mean, I'm not, but it's nice to have that input.
Yeah,
That's
because
why
there's
we
going to
did
be
this.
costs behind there, and we know that sometimes they struggle, so I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just really documentation of numbers, being accountable for what you're bringing in and where, what you're doing with it. I do that every month to this committee, and that's seen to the boards. Some of the private shelters, whether they're putting that out to their own boards, but they really don't have anybody else to answer to, except to the Department of Ag. We have FOIA'd over the years. Our state organization has FOIA'd those records, and it's surprising the amount of shelters that turn in no data whatsoever, but they still get their license. We're like, I think I might not get my license if I don't do that. But like I said, we take care of ourselves, and I think we're happy about this language. Is this something, since the advisory committee will be meeting prior to the board meeting, is this something that if the committee wishes to move on to the board, that we would have an opportunity between now and then, because we'll have a chance to talk about it.
We can put this on the agenda for our meeting next week.
Discussion
and
on
have
it.
a discussion on it.
If it's negative, then bring that back to us. If it's positive, then let's move forward on it.
If I could, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
maybe we just, if we support or we have a vote here on this, and that one could be, we were just looking for input from the committee before, and have you present that to the full board, or whoever is a representative.
Right.
If they agree, if they disagree, what are the concerns, and then we can go forward from there. Because I'm ready to support it, but I think that they need to be heard as well.
Agreed.
It was in discussion about when Dr. Wegner did present this. it is an eye-opener for many of the people that were on the advisory committee and also for the shelters, that especially 5477, that it is going to be something that I'm sure that we're going to support. I can't speak for everyone, but it will be a very good discussion. I can guarantee you that. We're a passionate little group.
Make the motion.
Motion to move this to the advisory committee for discussion. Is that
The
your-
motion is to support as the committee all of these endeavors, all these Senate bills and House bills.
Okay.
And then we'll hear their input when the full board.
All right, there's a first. Can I get a second? Mr. Payton? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. There you go, Julie.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Vickery?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
On the SB 3218, I was just curious about that, the reckless dog owner. Once you determine it's a reckless dog owner, what's the next step? I mean, I know this is part of a Animal Control Act, but I didn't see any penalty. I didn't see anything further. I'm just curious.
There will be, they talk about revoking, seizing all animals. If they're found reckless, they have to give up their animals. They can't have animals for a minimum period of time. It has been talked about to make that an undetermined amount of time, that a judge would set that. I'm sure there's still a lot of discussion going on with this bill, and I would anticipate, as most bills, you'll get an amendment here or there. But I think it's good language, and it's time to make sure that we are holding these folks accountable. I can tell you that dogs that I've had to take the time and effort to go to court in front of a judge to deem vicious. One dog in particular stayed in our shelter for probably 5 or 6 months. It's a long process. We cared for the animal. On that particular case, the judge did deem the dog vicious, but did not deem it euthanized. And then the people came back and said, well, we can't meet these provisions. We don't have any money. And they didn't come and get the dog. So we held that animal all that time, and their previous animals had bite situations, and they've had trouble since. So it's an owner issue, and they need to be held accountable.
Thank you very much.
I'm actually going to jump forward to the livestock reimbursement, and really I'm just briefly presenting this and would like to talk more in depth with the state's attorney on this and bring it back for really a vote or more information next month. But someone has come forward and stated that they had some sheep killed. They state by dogs. This is an old law that's out there that most of us probably don't even realize exists. I think many people may know that if you're on a farm, if you have livestock, even chickens, if dogs come and harass your livestock, you have the right to shoot them. It literally says the owner or keeper of a dog is liable to a person for all damages caused by the dog pursuing, chasing, worrying, wounding, injuring, or killing any sheep, goats, cattle, horses, mules, poultry, ratites, or swine belonging to that person. Then it goes on to talk about if we can find the owner of the dogs, then that owner is held responsible. If we can determine that it was actually dogs and not coyotes, and we cannot find any owners, then the animal owner can petition for the Animal Control Department to reimburse them for the loss of their livestock. I always found this rather interesting. It's like, they're not my dogs. But I think this law has been out there for a really, really long time, back when animal control was first formed to try to help the farmers. That's their livelihood and their livestock. And but I would like to, just wanted to make you aware of it and let you know that I would like to sit down and discuss this further with the state's attorney and get some good opinions on this particular case and bring it back next month. And then the last thing on my agenda is a property update, and I'm sad to see that Mr. Sykes isn't here. He always asks about a property update, and now I have one, and he's not here. But I'm a little bit excited about this. That question always comes, do we have a property update? Do I, have I talked to an architect? What's going on? And, a lot of the questions asked of me, I'm not an architect, so I don't have those answers. So I have a proposal from a local architect. Jeff Jarvis has given me a proposal to help us with the design phase. He's got things spelled out pretty well here. A construction document, and then construction phase. He realizes that at some point some of this stuff will have to go out for bid. I don't know all the details of what has to and what doesn't have to, but I know that we're at a crossroads where we need a crucial step of some guidance from an architect to know exactly what kind of design, how big of a building. We pretty full well know that we're not going to be able to build this building in its entirety, that we may have to do this in multiple phases. This person can help us lay that out so that I can come back to the committee and report, this is what we want to do. This is really what it's going to cost. This is what we're going to need. And I think it's a tool and a resource that will be able to help us in our fundraising endeavors. The president of BARC is here with us today. She's in the back, Abby Smith. And I know this is something that we talk about quite often in fundraising and, asking the community for support and for help. And they often, a few years ago, the question was always asked, well, where's it going to be? And we didn't have that. I would always kind of hang my head a little bit and go, oh, we don't have property yet. Well, we do. We've made that step. We have that property secured. And I'm real proud to say that. Well, our sign's out there on, South 45. Now I'd love to take the next step and get some input from this architect that could give us some real concrete numbers and a color rendering so that we can go out and use this tool to help us get to this goal before our building completely falls down. The design phase, and if I may, talk about the cost that he is requesting. Is that not something that has to go to executive, or is that okay?
No, let's talk about the cost first.
Okay. Okay.
That sometimes triggers the next.
The design phase, that the cost that he has asked for is $3,500, and in that phase, he would include the development of the building floor plan, master site plan, floor plan, building elevations for review and evaluation, and also subsequent inclusion of the construction drawings. In addition, three-dimensional renderings would also be included for the $3,500. That, I think, is one of the biggest things that we need, that first step. He has construction documentation with the project's design established. He would prepare final documents for permit, bidding, and construction. Selection of interior and exterior materials will be made in conjunction with the owner's requirements. The construction documentation would be $6,500. Civil engineer would be contracted by the owner. Mechanical engineer to be formed by subcontractors. Structural engineer included for an anticipation pre-engineering steel building construction. So he's got it laid out here pretty well. Then he talks about a construction phase. The services, if requested by clients, such as contractor bidding and negotiations, periodic site visits, meeting with contractor, review of pay requests, issuance of clarifications to the documents, and other services may be needed. Those would be $75 an hour, not to exceed $2,500. And as I understand it, this is not something that has to be done in one lump sum. We could take step one of the design phase and start there.
Discussion? Mr. Stauffenberg, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to make a note that I need to leave. I have an 11 o'clock appointment with my tax man.
So excused, sir. So excused on today, a day like today. Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you. Without a protracted financial discussion, because that will come at finance, not at executive. First, what fund do you propose to use to pay for that?
I would use our animal control fund or our IPTIP fund. I think we have adequate money in our animal control fund, probably without even touching our IPTIP fund. And be able to use that fund to do that. I mean, certainly it's nothing that would come from the county general fund or any of those monies.
So I would, just as for my perspective, the committee considers it and they want to go that direction. I think the first phase, to your point, is essential. The $3,000 to get a drawing and a floor plan for people want to see what they're donating towards. And the rest of that would come later, I think, as the county, and I can't even begin to guess when the county would have money to actually build it. But the part of showing the public and the people that support this endeavor that want to be partners in the long haul, I think that's well worth it. So, whoever else.
Mrs. Parker?
Yes, I like to agree with Mr. Wheeler, because this is a valuable tool in fundraising efforts for the building. People do want to see something where we're going. We need to see plans instead of, oh yeah, we're going to get around to it. Now with this, I think it's going to increase the fundraising efforts of the park and possibly other donors that would just like to donate to help with this cause.
I agree, and this will give them, Julie, an idea of kind of the larger number you're going to have to come up with. So, Mrs. Peters?
Have you looked around at other facilities that are out there built and possibly be able to buy a plan that's already done? I know that can be a lot cheaper. I know that there's schools out there, the schools who hire an architect and draw out a big old fancy school. Then there's issues with that school where if you find a building that already has plans, the people are already in it, they could say what they would change about the building possibly. You would know some pros and cons about the building and maybe get a drawing a lot cheaper than...
I don't believe these renderings are actual plans per se to where you could build off of them. They're not architecturally building plans, but they're renderings of the idea of what you're going to build. So I think when you get down to the plans, that's the next step, right?
Yeah, I believe that, it's step one, trying to get an idea, a site plan, the color renderings. And to answer your question, there are organizations out there. I was at a conference in Portland a couple years ago and talked to a gentleman from a place called Shelter Planners of America. He told me to come back to him when I had $1 million in my hand.
What?
And that's what they do, is design shelters. So I really, it wasn't even approachable. I can tell you that this gentleman has designed 3 local animal hospitals here in our county. The VCA County West, the new South Creek Hospital in Manteno, and the Natural Pet Clinic in Bourbonnais that sits behind the David Bruce Auto Center. He was the architect for those 3. So I think he's gotten some experience under his belt. I've always been told, I've been looking at this project for 18 years and visiting other shelters and talking to them and listening to, what they did and what they didn't like and what they, said, make sure you have this, make sure you're worried more about your air quality exchange and your sewage than you are the fancy exterior of a building, because that's a huge difference between building a bank or building some offices and building a shelter that's going to house and care for animals and animal disease and animal waste. And I think he's gotten some experience under his belt on that. So,
Mrs. Evans?
Yes, thank you. I I think typically the renderings go hand in hand with the blueprint. It's not something that you do the renderings first and then you create what's going to go inside of it. Usually when you buy a set of blueprints, on the cover of that usually is the rendering. So I mean, it usually all goes hand in hand, and you can create and change, like she said, what's going to be on the exterior. You could make it look like the Taj Mahal, or it could look like a steel building. But I mean, it's still, I think having the rendering, I think Jeff also, dealing with him for probably the past 18 years, I think he's definitely very capable of doing whatever we need for him to do. Whether this price is a high or low price, that I'm not familiar with, but I think having something in place, as Ms. Parker said and Julie said, I think for future events that are going to take place to raise funds, I think it's really important. And honestly, I think it might be possible to bring in the Kankakee Career Center, because through the Home Builders Association for many years, we did 3D plans at those students. And I think Jeff Humphrey would probably hop on board, since we no longer are doing that, to see and make it part of his curriculum. He made our 3D houses part of his curriculum. He might actually have the kids build one that the roof comes off, you see inside, and it would be absolutely no cost to you. But have the rendering done first, they could build it afterwards.
That would be exciting.
Mr. Tholen.
I was just curious as to, thank you, the Shelter Builders of America, or whatever that.
Shelter Planners of America.
Yep. They wanted $1 million to do the plan.
Basically, just to even talk with him any further. I mean, I kind of told him what we had, and that,
Makes
you know,
$3,500 seem cheap, huh?
it does.
Fraction.
I think when you're said and done, you're probably going to spend $1 million.
Oh, absolutely. I understand that. I'm just saying for.
Yeah.
And I guess that was off-putting to me. I understand, and that was one of the first things Mr. Jarvis asked me, what do you think it's going to take to build this? And I said, probably about $1 million. And I told him, you know, what we have between our organization and the BARC organization, and what we've been doing, and the position of the county, that, you know, they're not available to help us at this time. And he appreciated the fact that I was being realistic on the cost, but at least he's willing to talk to me.
Sure.
And help us get a step down the road.
Just for my knowledge, what ballpark are we talking between the BARC dollars and animal control dollars?
Where you at?
How big's our purse?
We have about $250,000.
Okay.
About 100 and what's my report? My March report.
Yeah, it was about
152,
154.
154,000 in IPTIP, and I think we're right at 90,000, maybe 96,000 in the BARC fund.
Okay.
So we're about there.
So right at about $250,000.
Yeah, which, I mean, to me sounds like, you know, a lot as an individual. I understand it's a down payment on a project this big, but I'm happy to say we have that, and
sure,
not nothing.
Yeah, I understand.
Mr. Vickery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's time we move forward on this basic step. It's not a lot of money, but and you've got it covered. I think it's time to move forward on it. We've been looking at this for a long, long time, and one basic step may help the fundraising.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're going to approve your project to move to Finance Committee, and then let them give their blessing to it. And so there's a motion, Mr. Vickery, and Mrs. Evans is going to second to move this to Finance. All in favor?
Aye.
All
Thank you.
opposed?
Thank you. And as far as agenda items, that's all I have. I do want to mention that we are adding monthly microchip clinics. I really was going to wait until we got a new shelter, but
Better do it now.
it's really needed. And so every third Thursday of the month from 4:30 to 6:30, we will be offering microchips for $15. We are encouraging people to make an appointment. Walk-ins are welcome. They may have to wait a little bit. On May 12th, we will also be participating with the Manteno FFA WAGs, Walks for WAGs or Walks and WAGs. We'll be offering microchips there as well. If you would like to, you have a four-legged friend and you want to get out and walk them, join us. Join the FFA there on May 12th. And Kelly Blue, my shelter manager's in the back. Can you tell me the name of that park? I know it's along 57 there, and I always forget the name of the park in Manteno. But it's on our website. It's on our Facebook page. Check that out.
Mr. Vickery.
Julie, just one question on the livestock reimbursement. Was that a large claim or is that a?
We don't get them very often, and it's been years since I've had any, and this is probably the largest that I've had. There were several sheep that the farmer lost, and years ago I said I have an old form, I think I have it with me, and things have changed quite a bit. I remember I believe I brought it, maybe I didn't, I might not have. I took this form down to the Department of Ag one time and showed it to Dr. Ernst, and he's like, I have never seen such a thing. It's old, it's yellow, it's calligraphy, and I think a chicken went for $1. I think a sheep went for $30. Well, now it's more market value. And I contacted the Benjamin Livestock facility in Peatone. I might be saying the name wrong, and got an average price of what sheep would go for, and we're talking close to $1,000.
Lamb chops
per sheep.
For the whole claim.
Oh.
Yeah. But if somebody were to lose a show horse.
Oh.
Yeah, that gets expensive.
So
one next door to me.
We would be in negotiations.
Yes, sir.
There's some real rules that they have to follow, and that's where I want to sit down with the state's attorney and make sure that they've done everything, because there are parameters that they wouldn't qualify for this because they didn't do what is expected of them by statute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Peters.
The FFA event is at Legacy Park in Manteno.
Thank you. Mr. Tholen.
There's two ordinances in here. Did we deal with those?
Next up on the agenda.
Do you want me to?
Next up. You can stay if you'd like.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Moving right along. We're trying anyway. Okay. Nope, stay right up here. Okay, I'd like to invite Mrs. Parker, chairperson of the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, to come up.
Tinker, do you want Karen up here though?
Yes.
Because I'm happy to step out and let you and Karen come up.
There's more chairs.
Yep. We got all kinds of room. All right. We're good. We're good. We're good.
Yeah.
Right here. There's another spot right here. Come on up.
Assuming it still rolls.
Okay. I'm going to introduce Tinker Parker as the chairperson for the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. Tinker, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you, I have set, it's a little bit of what AWAC, as we call it, AWAC, or as Chairman Wheeler calls it, Puppies and Kitties Committee. Fondly, he calls it that. We began in September of last year, and a very passionate group, a collective unit of shelters and wildlife care. Ms. Himza is in horse care, and of course we have Julie on there, and we also have 2 veterinarians that we're proud to have on our committee. You can see we wrote a mission statement of what we our goal is. And then below that, in the Roman numeral outline, will be an outline of what our scope of work is. And when we started this, we sat down with the chairman and decided what exactly this committee needed to do. And then we met with the committee after interviews with them. And I'm proud to say right now we do have Ms. Himza, who is part of our committee. Right there, Karen Himza. Karen, would you like to tell everyone what organization you represent?
I own and operate Sunrise Farms in St. Anne, a horse facility. I also have a small cat rescue in there. My organization mostly has been focused on spay and neuter in the county. I do a lot of spay and neuter in low-income areas such as trailer parks and things like that.
As you can see from the members that we're a very diverse group of people who represent our furry friends. One of the things that we have been discussing has been, and working with the state's attorney's office and with Julie on some issues here, has been, I think, one of the overlooked issue has been at the swap meet that's held once a month at the Kankakee County Fairgrounds. We do understand that there have been some sales of cats and dogs that may not be the most healthy. Is that the word I want to use? I don't want to, yeah. Not a healthy choice to purchase an animal at the swap meet, but we have worked with the animal control and Mr. Quinn in putting together an ordinance that we would like to present to this committee. The first is a swap meet of the dogs and cats, and if maybe Mr. Quinn, if you could please explain the language and the overall essence of this.
The ordinance in your packet is not correct. We've amended the titles, so we're gonna, Mr. Quinn will talk about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, when I was writing both of the ordinance before you today, I realized I used the same title for both of them. So we're just going to add "at swap meets" to the end of the title for this one.
An ordinance prohibiting the sale of dogs and cats at swap meets is the one we're talking about.
Just to distinguish between the two.
Yes.
Keeps it easy. And in terms of what the ordinance itself does, it completely prohibits the sale of dogs and cats at swap meets, and the ordinance would define a swap meet as a flea market, a swap meet, which would be open to general public or composed or enclosed, semi-enclosed outdoor stalls, stands, spaces rented or leased to persons on a temporary basis for the purpose of display and sale, barter, and exchange of new and used merchandise. So we tried to make that language as open as possible, so we don't have people say, no, it's not a swap meet, it's something else. The exceptions to that rule, of course, will be each animal, as well as the owner or operator of the swap meet itself. So we're going after people who violate this ordinance, but also the managers of the event that would be found in violation as well. So we're trying to get both the individual and the organization, so as to prevent ongoing things. Just because Julie's obviously limited in her resources in terms of what she can and cannot control.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
May we have Ms. Boudreau, maybe some of Karen, Ms. Himza, and have been to the swap meet, and maybe explain some of the conditions that have been observed at these swap meets, with especially the, we're defining just cats and dogs. Karen?
I'll just tell you what I know, and then maybe Julie can elaborate, because she probably knows more and has been there a lot more often because of a lot of animal issues at the swap. But basically, it's not being policed at all. So you have puppies and kittens under 8 weeks old, which is against state law, being sold. They're not in good health. They're coming over state lines without any kind of health certificates or regulations. It's been observed that they're not being cared for while at the swap. You know, they're cold, they're hot, lacking food or water in front of them. Another concern is stolen dogs being sold, like privately owned dogs being picked up, taken to the swap, and then sold. So it's not been originally meant for dogs and cats. It was a bird swap, but it's kind of just been open to almost any animal now. Yeah, it's really ballooned into out of control. I don't think the manager of the swap is doing the paperwork properly. He's not policing what's coming in and, you know, how they're selling the animals.
Ms. Boudreau, do you have anything to add to that?
I pretty much mimic what Karen has said. I've been to the swap meets several times. I've been there on behalf of the Department of Ag when they've asked me to go. We've been there ourselves when people have complained. And yes, as I've spoke with the Pigeon and Bantam Club, who I believe is oversees this or runs this swap meet. And I think that's what it originally started as, was a bird swap. And it has grown into swap and sale of anything and everything. I can tell you that I've seen people out there that have presented their animals in a good way. And they're mindful of how they transport their animals, how they care for the animals, whether it's hot or cold. But what I've seen a lot of excess of is the other side of that, where people are really not caring for the animals well. They're not transporting them well. You know, I can see that on the birds and fowl as well. But today we're only here to talk about the dogs and the cats. And I don't think it's a place for puppies and kittens to be sold. You don't know, for one, who you're selling them to. People that are buying them don't know where they're coming from. They're coming across state lines without health certificates. Looking at the definition in the law regarding swap meets, they are supposed to be tracking every animal species and number of animals that come into that swap meet, and then getting a record of every animal that is swapped and transferred and reporting that to the Department of Ag. When I inquired with the Department of Ag on that and asked if I FOIA'd that information, what I would get, and he said nothing. So that's not being done. So they're in violation of state law, and it's just not a proactive, healthy way to manage our sales and reproduction of dogs and cats, and we would like to see that prohibited.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yeah, just first a motion to approve and send this on to the full board. And
Okay.
and then a statement after that.
Okay, I have a motion. Can I get a second? Mr. Payton? All in favor?
Hold on, I believe Mr. Wheeler has
and
comments.
I
statement.
just wanted to mention that the things that have come up today are the exact reasons that we asked to have this committee established. It was to start off with the things that everybody agreed on and that would have the most impact, and have Julie advising as a non-voting member of this committee to be able to be that steadying force on what the local situation is in the law, but having a horse in the race, pun intended, but not necessarily directing what the committee does. And was there any dissenting vote when you were in your committee structure on this? Because it seems unanimous. It seems like something everybody agreed on.
Mr. Chairman, it was unanimous. We have vets that have been there and have examined what is happening at the swap meet. We have shelter owners or directors that have gone out there, and it is overwhelming that this has got to stop. That it just needs to be done.
Okay. Well, thank you all for your good work.
Mr. Fairfield. Number 11.
Number 11.
There you go, sir.
Would this in any way have any thing to do with the county fair?
No.
The animals at the county fair?
No, so the exception written into the ordinance would allow for the county fair to go on and anything else sanctioned by the county, the state, or if the federal government got involved as well. Obviously, we can't limit those. So no impact there at all.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Evans first.
Well, I would
There you go.
respond to his animals at the fair. They all have to be tested, and they are vets know that which animals are there. I mean, they all have to be like a vet comes, like when we bring pigs, the vet comes to our home and sees every pig and
That you're
their
gonna
ear
bring to the
notch
fair, right?
number and know exactly which pigs are there. Chickens have to be tested, all poultry. So I mean, that already is run, ag has control of that, so.
Mrs. Weber and Ms.
Thank you. I was just wondering, you talked about the fairgrounds, but maybe this is happening someplace else in the county too? Not that you're aware of? You don't,
The ordinance addresses that.
that it's other places, you're not naming the fairground?
No, we're not
you're saying-
naming it. We're just basically creating a category of event styles
Whenever it
that we're
happens,
prohibiting.
whether it's east, west, north, or south.
Right.
Mr. Lear?
You just made reference to the county approving certain actions. Would this open the door to someone who wanted to have an event where this kind of sale went on and had the kind of supervision that occurred, say, at a county fair?
In theory, I would imagine it would. I just left that language in there in case we wanted the flexibility of sanctioning events in the future. But my thought process was also things like her microchip fair she mentioned today, or her vaccination fair. I know there's no sales of animals going on at those events, but I didn't want to prohibit it if we wanted to open it up to something like that. Basically, our concern as a whole is unregulated, untested sales of dogs and cats. When I brought this to Jim Rowe's attention, he went out there and took pictures of the event and immediately sent, I don't know if it was dozens, Julie's seen the pictures, I unfortunately haven't, but many pictures to my colleague in our animal cruelty criminal prosecution unit. And I don't know where those are, but I know she was certainly looking at filing charges on some people.
Well,
it's that bad out there.
That would be my, what's the enforcement part of this? I mean, who are they going to call when you see something like this? You're going to call the county
Besides
sheriff?
Ghostbusters?
I was going to say, I want to say Ghostbusters.
Yeah, well,
Sorry.
that's, yeah, no, but I mean, that's the problem that I see with this is the enforcement part
Sure,
of it. You
sure.
know, we've got this on paper and I agree with it, but how you gonna catch somebody doing
Well,
it?
Julie and her staff are frequently out at the swap meets.
I can answer that question.
They have the authority to write county ordinance violations, and they do frequently for a variety of other county codes. And then it comes to yours truly, and I go after it to the extent I can.
Okay.
I think that if this is passed, then that's going to be it's going to be added on to the duty of the officer on call, or because it only happens once a month for so many months out of the year, unless something pops up and somebody advises us of it, we'll handle that within our staff. And my shelter manager and I have gone to 2 already this year. We do that certainly on our own time. We're just hoping that things, we just want to prevent the underage sick animals and the rapid sell of anything. I mean, I've walked through there and had somebody open their coat to me. Want to buy a dog?
Oh.
I mean, it's just kind of a
At
weird
least that's all they had under their coat.
situation. The Dog Day event. The Dog Day has been around and does a really great job of all kinds of great activities. But I can tell you, I've been there and had people trying to sell dogs, and had the event director come up to me and say, you need to go stop them and tell them to leave. So I think that this would apply to something
would.
like this as well.
Absolutely would.
Mrs. Evans.
There will be another swap meet before our next county board meeting.
Yes, there will.
They're the first Sunday of every month, and you need to go early, like with flashlights at 4 or 5 o'clock. There are people lining up not to necessarily buy, well, probably to buy, but the ones that are there to sell, and not cats and dogs, but as she said,
Any
any
kind of
animals that you can think of are there, and they're waiting to get in. And you'll have a real, I don't think you'll have any problem passing this if you go.
Okay. I have a motion. Mr. Vickery?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think enforcement's the problem in all of our ordinances. It's a tough job,
Absolutely.
and getting enforcement. One of the things that seems crazy, but I've been watching a lot of these shows, these animal shows on TV, and a lot of the animal problems that come into those vets are purchases such as this. The kids see this little dog or cat or rabbit or something, they think it's wonderful. They talk mom and dad into buying it, They go home and pretty soon that animal has problems. And they take it to the vet, and many things that should have been done, preventative things, were not done. And so they end up with the vet bills and the results. Sometimes they're not very pretty results. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have a motion and a second to move this to the full board. I'm sorry, sir. It's not open for public comment at this time.
Members at club, why weren't we asked to go to one of these meetings then, so we could have brought up what we see out there and what our part of it is?
I agree, sir.
Blaming us.
What I can,
why did we have a meeting last
no,
year?
and I'm going to invite you to the next AWAC club. No, this isn't the done vote. Okay, I want to make sure that you're aware. This is just moving this on to the full board to where they will approve it or deny it at that time. This is just coming through committee, sir. So if you have any concerns, please bring those up either at the full board at the public comment part, or you can talk to any one of us on the side, and we'll discuss your issues with you. But thank you for your comment.
Mr. Chairman?
May 8th at 9 a.m. is the full board. Do you have a meeting coming up?
We have a meeting coming up next Wednesday at 3 o'clock, second floor conference room. Our meetings are on website for the county board. Our agendas are always there. Our minutes are there.
You're welcome to come to any of
And the public
those.
is welcome to come. As a matter of fact, we have a lot of public comments.
So I have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor of moving this to the full board?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. And then we're just going to bring up the next, the pet shop ordinance. And yeah, I am out of order. Here we go. The title of the pet shop ordinance is an ordinance restricting the sale of dogs and cats. And then at the third whereas, instead of saying prohibiting, it says restricting.
Or it should say, yeah.
It says prohibiting, but it's gonna
Should
say
say restricting.
it's gonna say restricting. It
Right,
says
just to keep it-
restricting in Graham's
Yeah.
copy here. We're the only
I'm
ones that
confused.
don't have the right copy. So I need Mr. Wheeler, a motion to accept, and then second. Mrs. Evans, now we can have discussion on this one. Do you want to briefly go over this one too?
Yes, this was, thank you, Mr. Chair. This has been another of our concerns about animals being brought into basically puppy mill or puppy cat,
From
whatever mills that come into these pet shops. And again, we have a lot of the health problems of the animals not being taken care of, and as well as the health record not being with the animal as well. And again, going back to what Mr. Wheeler said and Mr. Vickery said, that a lot of sad families after a few months of having a very sick animal. Mr. Quinn, would you like to elaborate more on
Sure.
that?
Am I on? I can't.
You are on.
Yeah, I am on. Look at that. Just want to clear one thing up that Ms. Parker did say. As far as I'm aware, and Julie, please feel free to correct me here, it won't impact any current pet shop that's in our jurisdiction as it is right now. We wanted to pass this as a preventative measure, again, because, they get crafty sometimes, especially people with criminal background from puppy mills and those kind of situations. So just want to clear that point up, that it doesn't impact anything currently going on. Essentially, this is easy to understand. It's no pet store shall sell or otherwise transfer ownership for compensation of cats and dogs. That doesn't prohibit pet stores from renting their, the spaces, like I don't want to call them cages, but display cases, to nonprofits to provide a means to adopt them. It doesn't prevent that. It's just the sale of. And then the ordinance itself defines what. So I got myself all confused here. What a pet shop is and what it isn't. So we don't want to restrict adoption agencies or shelters or anything like that from transferring ownership. We just want to prevent the monetary compensation of dogs and cats. So that's what this would prohibit.
And if I may, this is something that's been passed certainly up in the city of Chicago some
It sure
time
has.
ago. I think there's some state language out there, but it only pertains to DuPage County. There may be another county, but I know DuPage.
Right.
And I'm not real sure why they're targeting just that area with the state language.
To be fair, Julie, I did get this language from the Humane Society of Illinois, so
Sure.
it's very similar language to DuPage.
It is, but they're just on the state language. Usually it's statewide. They're just kind of focusing on
some
one
reason
county.
Not keeping it state, they're keeping it county.
I guess.
I don't know why.
And as Mr. Quinn said, we do not currently have any small pet shops in this area that are selling dogs and cats. We have in the past, and I can tell you we had problems with them. I've gone into pet shops with the Department of Ag when they've asked us to assist them on problems, not only just, with sales of dogs and cats, but reptiles and such as well. And again, I think it's well known that when these small pet shops are selling dogs and cats, they're getting them from puppy mills and catteries, and the quality of animal that's coming in there is oftentimes not very healthy, not well socialized. The puppy mill that was shut down on Route 1 in 2015, that's the type of animals that are being mass produced and kept in cages, and then transported to pet shops for sale. And so I think we're trying to be proactive on this. And if a pet shop wants to open, we just want them to know that, we want their pet supplies. We really don't want them peddling puppy mill dogs and cats that are just mass produced in catteries.
Mrs. Parker, this was also unanimously voted on by your committee?
Yes, I believe, Ms. Himza, did you want it? It was voted overwhelmingly, yes. I think you have something to add to that?
Well, actually, I was just going to say some of the things that Julie just said, but there has been incidences of puppy mill people that have been convicted setting up shop in Farm and Fleet parking lot and things like this. This will help if that happens, that they could be, held accountable.
Mr. Lear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly understand the concern about puppy mills and kitten mills, and this may seem kind of naive, but if a family wanted to go get a dog or a cat, what would they be doing?
In other words, if they would be going to one of the pet shops, or if the pet shops...
If you just wanted a family decided they wanted to get a dog or cat and they don't, where do they go?
Well, yeah, certainly the trend is to reach out to shelters. And, I can say, and many of my colleagues and many other shelters will tell you, if you have a specific breed of an animal that you truly is near and dear to your heart, or you're an avid hunter, so you're looking for a hunting dog, there are professional, reputable breeders out there that you're going to be able to get a quality animal from. The red flags are somebody that wants to meet you in a parking lot. They don't want you coming to their home. They don't want you meeting the mom and dad. Most of your professional, reputable breeders, they're proud of what they're doing. They're doing it for the betterment of the breed. They're doing it, and everything that they're doing goes back into that animal to help reduce disease and hip problems and eye problems and elbow problems. And I recognize that there are those folks out there that are doing this for a professional reason, and they're doing it well. They're just not as abundant as those that are not doing it well.
Thank you.
Mr. Vickery?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Julie makes a good point. We got online and found a breeder, and then the main thing is visit the breeder and inquire about the heritage of the animal. Inbreeding is a very big problem, especially with small dogs. So we tried to cover all the bases, and
Mr. Sewer?
our efforts have been successful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Graham, go.
Sorry, I don't mean to hurry the conversation up here, but I do have an ordinance violation call in 10 minutes. So is there any legal questions about this? And I need to jet.
Mr. Wheeler?
The only thing I have to say is I would hope that everybody that's in this county or even anywhere else would stop by a local shelter first before they start getting on the internet to breeders. We have a big pet population that are in our local shelters and at animal control and elsewhere. I would rather see that taken care of first, but that's just me personally.
Agreed. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. I would
Can I
like
go?
to
See you, Graham.
thank the
Thanks,
state's
guys.
attorney's office, especially Mr. Quinn, who has been at most of our meetings, most of the meetings, we've worked very well with the state's attorney's office. So again, thank you, Mr. Rowe and Mr. Quinn. Appreciate it. And Ms. Boudreau, we want to thank you too for bringing some of this information to our group, and our veterinarians who wanted to be here today, but they are performing surgery. Dr. Fedro at one hospital and Dr. Wegner at another hospital, but they both send their support for this ordinance.
Okay, all in favor of the pet shop ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That, Mr. Fairfield, and it will move to the full board. Thank you. Anything, do I have any old business in front of the committee? Do I have any old business? Yes, don't anybody leave till they sign. Do I have any new business in front of the committee? Any new business? Mr. Wheeler? We have a motion to adjourn. So moved. Mr. Payton, second. All in favor to adjourn? Aye. Opposed? Don't forget to sign this for Diane, please.
Right here. Thank